You ever have one of those weeks where you wake up on a Saturday thinking the biggest thing on your to-do list is mowing the yard, and by Friday, you're in handcuffs on your own front lawn, accused of trespassing on land, your name is stamped on the deed? Yeah, that happened. They say the American dream comes with a white picket fence. What they don't tell you is sometimes the folks on the other side of that fence are just waiting for a chance to take a chainsaw to it and call the cops while you're still holding the lumber. Let me back up a sec because nobody starts their life expecting to be enemy number one in their own neighborhood. I'm Michael Thompson, veterinarian by trade, decent soccer dad by night, and up until last week, I was about as controversial as a grilled cheese sandwich. But that was before Patricia Hamilton, HOA President Queen Bee, and owner of a smile that could freeze a running engine, decided that my little private property sign was some kind of declaration of war. You want to know how far an HOA can go? Buckle up, because you're about to get an education in just how crazy things can get when somebody's got a taste for power and a talent for bending the rules. 24 hours before the handcuffs, I was just a dad in sweats, coffee in hand, watching my 9-year-old Brandon try to turn our backyard into Wembley Stadium. "Dad, can I set up my goalposts here?" he asked, pointing at a skinny patch of grass the last owners never really used. According to our survey, paid for, signed, sealed, and checked twice by our lawyer, that was ours fair and square. So I told Brandon, sure, let's make it official. We hit the hardware store, grabbed a bright white sign with bold black letters. Private property. Nothing nasty, nothing dramatic. Just the plain truth. I figured it'd keep things simple, you know? Boundaries are important even for dogs, and apparently even more so for suburban humans. Jen, my wife, she wasn't so sure. I remember her pacing the kitchen, coffee going cold, looking at me with that half-worried, half-guilty look. "Are you sure this is necessary?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself instead of me. I should have known even then there was something she wasn't saying. But I chalked it up to new neighborhood nerves and got back to work letting Brandon hold the level while I dug the hole. That was the last normal afternoon we'd have for a long time. Come dinner time, I noticed Patricia across the street, phone up snapping photos like she was documenting a crime scene. Jen whispered, "That's the HOA president," and I caught something tight in her voice, like she was bracing for a storm I couldn't see. 30 seconds later, Patricia was gone. But that unease, it settled in and made itself at home. Next morning, I wake up to an email subject line screaming, "Notice of alleged violation." Patricia's name shiny, new HOA logo, legalese, thicker than peanut butter. My sign apparently was unapproved exterior signage violating some code I'd never heard of. Remove it or face consequences. By 10 a.m., Patricia was on my doorstep, leather portfolio in hand, that same smile warm enough for a business card, cold enough for a morgue. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "we need to discuss your recent addition to the neighborhood landscape." She laid out paperwork like it was a poker game, and she already had 4 aces. "The HOA has maintained that strip since 1987, she insisted, jabbing at a highlighted paragraph like it was a loaded gun. I pushed back gently at first. "My deed says it's mine. My survey says it's mine. My lawyer says it's mine." Patricia didn't blink. "Community management supersedes individual claims in certain cases," she replied, sliding more documents across the table. It felt like being cross-examined for using my own mailbox. Then Jen came home, arms full of groceries, smile nowhere in sight. She saw Patricia in our living room, and instead of confusion, I saw resignation. "Maybe we should just, err on the side of caution," she muttered, barely meeting my eye. That's when my world started to tilt. Jen, the same woman who once argued with a parking officer for half an hour, was ready to roll over for Patricia. Something was off. That night, my phone rang. A law office representing the HOA removed the sign in 24 hours or face trespassing charges. Jen's face went sheet white, but it was like she'd seen it coming. The next day I tried to work, but all I could think about was that sign still standing in our backyard like a dare. At 6 sharp, a cop showed up at our door, hands tucked behind his belt, reading from a script I'm here to document a complaint. He didn't care about my paperwork. He didn't even want to see the survey. If they pursue criminal charges, you'll hear from us again, he said. And just like that, I became the villain in my own neighborhood. Patricia watched the whole thing from across the street, arms folded, lips curling into a smile I'll never forget. Jen, meanwhile, was quiet, too quiet. And the more I tried to pull her into the fight, the further away she drifted. It was like living with a ghost. Tuesday, things escalated. Patricia marched into my vet clinic, flanked by a skinny guy in a suit and a clipboard-wielding woman. One last chance, she said, all business. Remove the sign by 5 p.m. or we're pressing charges. They handed me a cease and desist order, and a criminal complaint threatened me with $5,000 in fines, 90 days in jail. For a sign. On my land. This is harassment, I told them, voice flat but heart pounding. Patricia didn't flinch. Your neighbors support us. Law enforcement agrees. You can either comply or fight this in court. The woman with the clipboard wrote down every word. By that evening, I had a stack of documents and a splitting headache. My lawyer was in court all week, his assistant barely interested. At 6:00, Patricia called, no small talk. We filed criminal trespassing charges. Officer Williams will serve you with a citation. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang, and there he was, citation in hand. You need to appear in court next Monday. His eyes said he knew it was nuts, but the law is the law. That night, Jen set a cup of coffee next to my mountain of paperwork, rubbing my shoulders the way she always did. But it felt mechanical, distant. Maybe it's time to consider they're right about the boundaries, she whispered. I stared at her, feeling like the last sane man in a madhouse. Jen, they're threatening to put me in jail for a sign. She just shrugged, eyes on the floor. Maybe this isn't the hill to die on. Think about your practice. About Brandon. Wednesday, I got the gut punch. Reporters showed up at my clinic, shoving microphones in my face, asking about the criminal veterinarian disrupting community harmony. The evening news painted me as the stubborn outsider, the guy who refused to respect tradition. Neighbors who'd never spoken to me were suddenly lining up to defend the HOA. Even Mrs. Patterson from down the street gave a soundbite about respecting the rules. Jen watched the broadcast, silent and pale. This is getting out of hand, she said. Brandon's being teased at school. People are talking about us everywhere. I wanted to scream, wanted to run outside and shake the whole world until it remembered what was right. Instead, I just sat there hollowed out. Thursday night, Officer Williams called. Come to the station tomorrow for processing. The DA wants you booked. Booking. As in fingerprints, mugshots, the whole works. Jen tried one last time. Just take it down, Mike. Please. They'll arrest you in front of Brandon. But the way she said it, it sounded less like concern and more like an order. Friday morning, shaving in the bathroom, I saw Jen's phone light up PH, make sure he doesn't lawyer up before the arrest. Everything depends on him staying isolated. PH Patricia Hamilton. My wife coordinating with the woman trying to destroy us. My hand shook so badly I nearly cut myself. Jen, I called, come here. She stood in the doorway, mug in hand, looking like she'd already lost the argument. How long, I asked. She slumped against the doorframe, voice flat. Since before we moved in. Patricia said she'd make things easier, help Brandon get into the soccer league, make us feel welcome. All I had to do was keep her informed. I never thought it would go this far. Her words barely registered. I was already numb. At 9:00, Williams arrived, handcuffed me in front of my son, my neighbors, and that damn sign. Patricia stood across the street, victory written all over her face. Jen stood in the doorway, hand over her mouth, finally realizing her small compromises had turned into a total betrayal. 6 hours in county lockup gives you time to think. About truth. About trust. About how easily authority can be weaponized when nobody bothers to ask questions. I was released. My lawyer finally called in favors, and the first thing I did was head to the county courthouse. What I found blew everything wide open. Patricia didn't even buy her house until 3 years ago. The HOA she bragged about, she founded it herself. The land she claimed had been maintained by the community. It was actually cared for by old Mr. Mitchell, A neighbor who watered the garden for the last owners out of kindness, not obligation. No documentation, no 30-year tradition. Just Patricia spinning a web and hoping nobody would look too closely. Mrs. Patterson, it turned out, was a retired paralegal. She dug into public records, found the same lies, and handed me a folder thicker than my old vet textbooks. Together with Mr. Mitchell, we built an airtight case, timeline contradictions, forged maintenance logs, phony community agreements. I had evidence, I had witnesses, and I had a recording app running when I confronted Patricia face to face. She tried to bluff, claimed I was disrupting community harmony, that she was only protecting the neighborhood from decline. But when I laid out the records, no HOA before 2021, no maintenance before my house was built, Mitchell's letter, her mask cracked. The real slip came when I mentioned development proposals. Patricia had filed plans to turn my backyard into a commercial project. The community she wanted to protect was just a gold mine with my name on the deed. Monday, the district attorney listened to my tape. By lunchtime, Patricia's house was swarming with investigators. She was arrested, charged with fraud, and suddenly the same neighbors who'd crossed the street to avoid me were lining up to apologize. We called a community meeting. I laid it all out, timeline evidence, the scam. Even Jen stood up crying, admitting how Patricia had manipulated her into betraying me, all for the promise of fitting in. By the end of the night, the HOA was dissolved, Mrs. Patterson elected interim president, new bylaws drafted, and Patricia's web of lies unraveling in front of a packed room. 3 weeks later, the neighborhood is different. Brandon practices soccer on the disputed land, his laughter echoing in the autumn air. The new private property sign stands where the old one did, but now it's not just a marker, it's a monument to what happens when one stubborn person decides to fight back. Jen and I are slowly repairing what got broken, one honest conversation at a time. I learned the hard way that authority without accountability is just a con waiting to happen. But I also learned that truth, armed with evidence and a little bit of stubbornness, can still win. So here's my question for you. When was the last time you challenged something that didn't feel right, even if everyone else told you to go along with it? Drop your story or your opinion on justice and HOA drama in the comments. And hey, if you ever feel like the world's upside down, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more tales of mayhem, karma, and the kind of common sense you wish was contagious.